everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend and I do horror-related things on the internet, and I am very happy to be back and doing another movie review because, again, it's been a hot minute since I've done one of those. It's been a really long time since I've done one from my dorm room, and I'm in a different dorm room since the last review I did in one, so this may be the first and only time you see this dorm room. It may be one of many. It really depends on how busy I am. But today I had time to review a movie, and I'm especially excited about this one because rather than going back to the box set I've been working my way through, I am reviewing another screener that was sent to me by the amazing Steve Rudzinski. And he has sent me a couple screeners for movies he's directed now, and I will probably reference those movies in this review and link those reviews either somewhere down in the cards or somewhere up above. But the movie I'm going to be reviewing today came out just this year, 2023, and it is CarousH3LL, obviously the sequel to CarousH and CarousH2, which I've done a review of. That was one of the first reviews I did from one of my college dorms. But today I am wearing a little unicorn hair clip, which I am of course wearing in honor of Duke, the prettiest goddamn unicorn in the world. But for those of you who have absolutely no context for this movie or any of the previous CarousH movies, first of all, you should watch them. Second of all, if you have not watched them, this is going to be a very spoiler-heavy review for both those movies and the existing film, so if you have not had a chance to watch any of the CarousH films and you don't want them spoiled, go ahead and watch them. I will try and give some context for where these movies are currently available. I know Steve has told me, but I did not have a chance to cite that and write that information down before I started filming, so I will put that info either in this video somehow or in the description below. So if you want to access this movie or the pre-existing CarousH movies and watch them before you watch this review, I will have info on that either at the very, very end of this video, so scroll to the end if you're feeling bold, or I will try and put it in the description of this video. CarousH3 came out this year, 2023. It is directed by Steve Rudzinski, who directed the original CarousH and its sequel, as well as Amityville Christmas Vacation, A Very Meowy Christmas, and a great many other films, as well as starring in CarousH and Amityville Christmas Vacation, and possibly A Very Meowy Christmas, and starring in this movie. And the film is co-written by Rudzinski and Aline Isley, who is a writer on all the CarousH movies and A Meowy St. Patrick's Day. And this film stars Autumn Ivy, who has done voice acting in The Mortuary Assistant, Lore Olympus, and an episode of Crypt TV Creepypasta. There are a couple professional wrestlers in this movie, including Katie Arquette, who does stuff with AEW and WWE, and wrestler Paul Bilbo, who has, of course, done other wrestling stuff, but was also in Shingles the Movie, another Steve Rudzinski outfit, and Jessa Flux, who has done a lot of low-budget horror films, including Murder Size, Debbie Does Demons, which I did not realize her character was Carmilla Karnstein in Debbie Does Demons until I checked the IMDb page, so now I really need to see that one, and Slumber Party Slaughter Party 2. For those of you who don't know, in CarousH 1, Duke is a CarousH unicorn, one of the animals on a carousel who becomes sentient, is pissed off at people, particularly kids, kind of just rubbing their grimy little fingers on him all the time. He gets up, he goes on a killing spree, finds himself at a house party, and lots of fucked up shit goes down. CarousH 2, Duke finds out that he has a son, he kills Nazis, and has a redemption arc. It's wild. And then in this film, we are following Duke, as well as his son Robbie, who are now confronted with Joe, the pizza guy from the first movie, who Duke seemingly killed, but who is alive and back with a vengeance, but is working for a company called Mascot, which is the outfit that Cowboy Cool from the first movie worked for, and is trying to reconcile the fact that Duke is now a hero with his need to confront the trauma of the grisly murders he witnessed and his own personal loss of his dog that he was not able to feed with the money he was supposed to get from the pizza. But all that's going on. Meanwhile, another sentient carousel animal, a rabbit named Usagi, has arrived on the scene. Is just as murderous as Duke was in the first movie, but is also absorbing the power of other sentient objects to become the most powerful, and is set on wiping out Duke and Mascot. So all of that is happening. And both Duke and Joe must reckon with their own inner struggles to confront Usagi. So the score for this film was done by Mike Trebilcock, who did, I don't know if he did the first Carousel or not, but I know for a fact that he did the second one, as well as Rudzinski's Amityville Christmas Vacation and Seb Godin's The Abominations of Frankenstein, all of which I love. And it is very much in the tradition of the score in the first two movies, but it has seemingly maybe even an even greater level of, grandiosity and cinematicness, because this film really feels like, even though it is still a very low-budget film, it has a much grander scale and a much more epic feel than the previous two films. Also, in terms of music, there is a character named Radical Rat, who is one of the members of Mascot, and he will say things like, radical or tubular or righteous. I don't remember all of the things he says, but he'll say that, and he'll do these little hand gestures, and it's always during, legitimately serious conversations, and I'll talk about that in a little bit, but every time he does that, the score will just throw in a little bit of shred guitar, and it's absolutely sent me every time it happened. I also just wrote in my notes that training montage music. I don't remember now what the training montage music sounds like, but it must have been good for me to have made that note, so yeah. I did, if I have one complaint, and it's not that much of a complaint because it is kind of funny, but it did start to get on my nerves a little bit. Every time there's a fight scene, because we go back to the same fight scene between Joe and Duke twice, it plays the same song both times, and then there's a third fight scene, which is where the professional wrestlers come in, and they bring back that rock song again. And I was just like, are we using the exact same song for every fight scene? Please. Again, one of Steve Rudzinski's signature moves in terms of humor is beating a joke, if not to death, then at least senseless, but just ramming it into the ground until the fact that it keeps going is what's funny. So I don't know if that entirely worked for me in this context, but if that was what you were trying to do, I do see that. And then my most chaotic note on the page is about the end credits, because oh my fucking god, I was not ready. One of my favorites, frankly my favorite hip-hop artist, is Poltergeist OD. He is someone who I discovered through the online horror community. He writes rap songs based on horror movies. They are always very, lyrically specific to the films, lots of little in-depth references, amazing wordplay. It has excellent songs based on Phantasm, Scream, Sleepaway Camp, Mars Attacks. I love this guy's stuff. At first I was just like, oh sweet, they're doing, the Carousel rap song at the end of this. Cheesy, fun, I'm loving this. And then I was like, whoa. This is really lyrically specific. The wordplay is excellent. There's lots of hyper-specific references to things throughout the franchise happening here. Is this Poltergeist OD? And then I saw his name go across the screen, and I was like, yes! Go listen to Poltergeist OD. I will link his YouTube channel down here, and his Spotify, whatever else I need to. I thought it was really fun to have a full cold open scene that was a flat-out callback to the entire house party that was the plot of movie 1. Right off the bat, Usagi, who is the killer carousel rabbit, arrives on scene, and you have somebody casually standing next to her go, hey, are you a talking carousel rabbit? And then she brings out her fist and punches the guy's head into oblivion, and it's very gory and realistic, and that shit is exactly what Duke does to somebody in the first Carousel movie, so nice callback right off the bat. And then there's a ton of callbacks throughout the entire opening scene. There's callbacks to Joe the pizza guy with, in terms of another Pete's Pizza delivery person. There's another permutation of the My Tiny Uni fan people from the first movie, except they're fans of something related to bunnies this time, so it works in that way. It's referencing the first movie at the wazoo, but showing that Usagi is kind of filling the role of villainous, murderous carousel animal that Duke used to occupy, and that was just really fun to me. And it was just nice to hear all the absolutely fucking atrocious puns, again, I have to say. And the other thing that is back is the incredibly uncomfortable sex scenes. Again, it's a callback to a specific scene from the first movie, as well as taking the same form as a scene from the second movie, but, like, that is kind of my least favorite part of both of those movies, but, like, I also appreciate the absurdity of it, and it is relevant to the plot structure of the movie, so there's not really much I can say against it, except that I found it uncomfortable, but I'm me, so, you know. I also thought it was interesting that they don't do a lot with it, but they do bring this uncomfortable father versus stepfather dynamic with Robbie's stepdad and Duke, who's his actual dad. Again, they don't do a lot with it. I thought they were going to do more with it. There's, like, these moments where he's just like, don't forget your lunchbox or your special bowling shoes on your time with your biological dad, and there will be ominous music playing under it. Nothing ever comes of that, which I think is just the joke. But I was just like, oh, is there more happening here? Like, I thought that was going to play into the plot. And it kind of does in terms of, I forget the stepdad's name, but it does kind of play into the plot in terms of the characters he trusts and the decisions he makes, but I thought he was going to have a more active role in creating conflict. And it's fine that he didn't. I was just a little surprised by that because of the highly specifically choreographed little bits of ominousness in there. And the other thing that I find really uncomfy, but also it's still funny, is the Nazi-owned hot dog stand from Carousel 2 is back. Except it is not owned by Nazis, it is kosher now, and owned by the son of the previous owner, who seems to not know that his dad was secretly a Nazi, even though he was not very secret about being a Nazi. And the stand is still called Frankenfuhrer's, which, like, the irony of that is kind of funny, but it's also fucked up in a way that's still super uncomfy. Like, again, I talked about this in my Carousel the second review, but, like, you do humor and you bring Nazis into it in any capacity, and it's gonna make me question things constantly in terms of, is this comfortable? Am I allowed to laugh at this? What's going on here? But the irony of that is kind of delicious. And gradually I was just like, at first just like eating up all of the ridiculous Steve Rudzinski humor and being like, oh, this is fun, this is goofy, this is ridiculous, this is what I'm here for. But then I was like, wait, this movie has a fucking heart. There's like genuine nuance happening here, because like all of a sudden I'm just realizing, oh shit, the consequences of Duke's actions in the first movie are coming back to get him. This does not happen in movies like this usually. Certainly you would not think that based on the first movie at all, which is like a straight up slasher. If you were expecting sequels to the first Carousel, that is the last thing you would expect. It just complicates the story in a legitimate way that I love. And then Duke starts talking to Robbie about how he didn't understand himself, and killing felt right to him in the time because he's, you know, a human soul trapped inside a sentient carousel object, but also there's the power of the old gods, and the lore of these movies is ridiculous and fucked up, but there's also genuine emotion behind them, and I was just expecting the silly goofy coming into this and not ready to get legitimate emotions. And then again, I was just like freaking out over the lore of this movie, because, like, in this movie, it's where we find out why carousel animals are coming to life, and I can't tell if it's retconning the stuff from the first movie or not, because I feel like experimentation on Duke was what brought him to life, but then it's like, no, the power of the old gods is in the carousel animals, whatever that means. I just ran with it. It works. I don't give a shit. And then just all of the lore around mascot, which is like an abbreviation in this world. I don't know what it stands for, but it's like S.H.I.E.L.D. in Marvel, and it was absolutely sending me, because Cowboy Cool in the first movie is basically just supposed to be the Dr. Loomis to Duke's Michael Myers, the person who's constantly pursuing him to put him down. But then, by this movie, we find out, no, there's an entire organization of people who dress up in theme park mascot outfits specifically for the purpose of hunting down different kinds of sentient objects that are hurting people and taking them out. That is the entire premise of what mascot is. And that is only made funnier by the fact that mascot is now fading as an organization. They are on their last legs. They're like the old guard, and they're trying to reckon with that. And that's the funniest shit in the world to me, because the movie plays it so straight, so to speak. And then halfway through a conversation between Duke and Usagi, I was like, wait a fucking minute. These are two inanimate objects on screen. It is cutting between an inanimate plastic unicorn and an inanimate plastic rabbit. I don't know if they're made out of plastic, I'm just assuming, but two inanimate objects. It's cutting back and forth between those objects with people's voices over them. There's no motion happening. And I'm completely engaged in this conversation. My disbelief's completely suspended. This is a movie that is constantly pushing in your face how artificial it is, but the storytelling is so genuine that I completely just overlooked that in moments, and that is a testament to how good the writing and the characterization in this movie actually is. And again, this movie is just abounding with the obvious Steve Rudzinski humor that I love so much. Like, you'll have moments where characters make a joke, and then they over-explain the joke, and the over-explaining of the joke becomes the joke, and it's wonderfully funny because of that. I don't want to give away too many of those examples, but that's just completely on brand for these movies and the other Rudzinski movies I've seen, and I love it. It doesn't always work for me, but I can usually at least appreciate it as like a signature move at this point. I was also appreciating the fact that we have a villain in Usagi who is a sentient carousel being, but this movie is able to provide human henchmen like we got in Carousel II, as, you know, cannon fodder for Duke and friends to fight their way through by having Usagi reproduce all of these tiny little fluffy bunny creatures that latch themselves onto people and become like brain parasites and animate their lifeless husks. So you've got a main villain who is a carousel animal, but also a bunch of human henchmen that our main characters can fight with, and I thought that was a really good way of doing that. And then I was really impressed by the story structure of this movie. Partway through, it really goes to what feels like a climactic scene. It is the big fight between Joe and Duke actually gets shot, and it looks like he's laying on the ground dying, and then it cuts to the end credits, and then suddenly cuts back, and then rewinds, and we've been sort of with Duke's perspective and a little bit of Usagi this whole time. But now we're cutting to what Joe has been doing this whole time and his perspective on things leading up to all of those events, and we run through them beat by beat, even cutting back to some of this exact same shots from the last few scenes, just from Joe's perspective. And then we get to the exact same spot. Duke is lying on the ground bleeding out, and then it cuts to the end credits again. And then it cuts back, and Robbie comes in and is like, no, Dad, you can't kill him. And Joe is finally able to fucking process his trauma in a relatively healthy way. Again, this movie is so ambitious in terms of the things it's doing with its budget and its absurd premise in terms of storytelling, which I love that the CarousL movies have enough of a dedicated fan base that I'm sure Rudzinski would do whatever the fuck he wanted with these movies anyway, but I'm glad that there is an audience who I'm sure is going to appreciate that, because they're not just slasher fans, they are also just dedicated to this style of film, and I am becoming one of those people, so... And then speaking of Joe processing his trauma, he just sort of breaks down crying at some point, and I felt my tear ducts just welling up a little bit, and I was like, no, this is not allowed. The third CarousL movie, a series of movies about a sentient killer carousel unicorn, is not allowed to make me cry. That's not fair. But I'm a little impressed. Usagi has an iconic death scene, one of the most grandiose in the franchise, I might even say. But my favorite things in the movie happen shortly before that, because one, every time we've seen Usagi in the film, there's been these little flowers that float down and woodwind music that starts playing. And the very last scene, Duke is like, where the fuck is that music coming from? Why does that happen every time you do this? And then the camera cuts down to show one of the little bunny parasites playing like a woodwind instrument, and then Duke kills it. And I love that. I love it when shit like that is just randomly revealed to be diegetic sound. Like, it's so funny to me. And then, because Joe and Duke have teamed up in the final scenes to fight against Usagi, my favorite one-liner in the whole movie, and I think the smartest one-liner in the whole movie, because Joe is the former Pete's Pizza guy, is when Usagi says something to the effect of, oh, and do you really think he's going to succeed? And Duke's like, yeah, Joe usually delivers in 30 minutes or less. I gotta say, I wasn't expecting future Robbie. I'm not gonna tell you what that means. Just watch the movie. Effects-wise, gore looks absolutely brutal. There's, again, a level of artifice to everything in this movie. Although Robbie looks great as a fully articulated puppet, unlike any of the other object characters, because he's part human, part object. But the gore is I wouldn't say hyper-realistic because it's so over the top, but it has a certain degree of realism and gruesomeness that feels kind of off from the other things happening in the movie, but is also so intrinsic to the franchise, and I loved it. And also, just audio-wise, I think the sound design adds so much to the artificial-looking kills, because again, the thing I love about them is that they look so choreographed and artificial, but really, this movie has excellent sound design, and that really kind of enhances those scenes and helps me suspend my disbelief just a little bit more. Usagi, again, I kind of mentioned her a little bit. She's very suave and kind of has this ethereal but cocky attitude to her, mixed with terrible hair and rabbit puns throughout, that I greatly appreciated. My favorite character, one of my favorite characters in the movie, if not my favorite character, is Richard. Richard is a sentient dildo with googly eyes. He's only in one scene in the movie because they kill him off instantly, and I was like, no, I wanted him to be like a more significant character. But Richard is a sentient dildo with googly eyes who speaks in a French accent, and when he gets angry, because like he's just a dildo with googly eyes stuck on it, and he just stands there and people talk over him like they do with all the other object characters. But when he gets angry, there are little cutout eyebrows that'll go on above his googly eyes to give him little angry eyebrows. And it's so cute, and it's so ridiculous, and I love it so much. I wish he was like a recurring character, but I understand what his purpose in the movie was too, so, oh well. But also, Richard, I wanted more of you. I am once again obsessed with Duke and Robbie's father-son relationship. I love that Robbie has like a special interest in space, and Duke is nurturing that as much as he can. It's the cutest thing in the world. We get really like nuanced, in-depth conversations about morality based on the events of the prior film that Duke has with Robbie, and like after seeing him as a murderer for the past two movies, like, this is this is genuinely good parenting. Like, holy shit. You take out the murder and this is like A+ parenting. I love Duke so fucking much. And I love seeing, like, this new vengeance version of Joe that we're getting, because he's got a very, like, Snake Plissken thing going on. He lost an eye in the first movie, so he's wearing an eye patch, which really goes into that, and he's talking like this now, which we ultimately find out is because he had something stuck in his throat the whole time. And I love the way that this movie contrasts Duke and Usagi, because Usagi's kind of, again, fulfilling the position that Duke occupied in movie 1, but the turns have tabled at this point. We not only get that contrast, but we get a contrast in their approaches to parenthood based on the father-son relationship with Robbie, and the way Usagi is like, yeah, my progeny aren't really sentient, they're just little parasites that do whatever I want. I don't really care if you're squishing them and killing them, because I can just make more. Yeah, whatever. And Duke, before she said that, was like, I'm surprised you're not more upset right now, because I just killed your kids. Because again, it's a ridiculous context for this conversation to be happening in, but it's a legitimately interesting contrast happening there. Like, I love the character stuff going on in this movie. And then you've got all of the mascots of Mascot, and my favorite thing about them is that they are all always talking in their children's mascot character voices no matter what's happening. They can be having the most serious conversation in the world. They can be on the ground dying and delivering very important plot information, but they always sound like a happy-go-lucky children's character no matter what they're saying, and that choice is just perfect. I love it so much. And again, my favorite is Radical Rat. He's just got the goofiest, like, surfer dude voice, man. He refers to people, specifically Joe, as brodent, which is the funniest fucking thing in the world. And I also loved the son of the previous owner of the hot dog stand. He almost has a character arc, but then doesn't, but like, I loved his character while he lasted, and that's all I really have to say about him. And then ultimately, just on a visual level, the cinematography in this thing is actually gorgeous. In the mascot headquarters, there is some cool kind of 80s or Argento or just like very intense green lighting that I thought was cool. All in all, it does not work if you have not seen the first 2 CarousH3LL movies, but this is probably my favorite out of the 3 because it is so ambitious and so wild and has so much heart that I could not help but just completely lose myself in its absolutely batshit insane plot. And I thoroughly look forward to watching this again, because I probably will, and watching the first 2 CarousH3LL movies immediately beforehand, because I did not have a chance to do that before filming this review, but watching this made me want to go back and watch them all again, so that, I think, says a lot in its favor. If you want a serious horror movie, stay far the fuck away from this, but if you want absurd, low-budget filmmaking that legitimately has a lot of heart, I think you're very, very, very much in the right place. And if you like Brzezinski's other stuff, you're gonna love this. I know this kind of movie is not gonna be for everybody, but it was very much for me, and I am sure other people are gonna get enjoyment out of it. Again, I know Steve provided me with the information for where you can access this film. I just did not have a chance to cite it before I started filming, so I will put that information either edited into this video somehow or in the description. But that is my review of CarousH3LL 3. Thank you for watching my video, and hopefully I will see you in another one. Bye!